So you got your Gunlancer to 50 and started getting some upgrades. But where should you be taking your build exactly to best round out your Gunlancer? Hello friends, it's Goobs here, and in this video I'll be covering some of the more detailed aspects of both the Lone Knight Gunlancer, also known as the Red build, and the Combat Readiness build, also known as Blue Gunlancer. As always though, if you find this content helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel for more Lost Ark content in the future. Starting out, we're going to be looking at the Lone Knight. This build is the more bursty variation of Gunlancer at the expense of losing some tankiness. For the engravings, I will list them as core engravings and then the supplementary engravings. For your core engravings, you should focus on Lone Knight, Supercharge, and Grudge. So for Lone Knight, this is your class engraving, and this will enhance your spear skills or the orangish red skills. This is why it's called the red build, because it enhances your red skills. The spear skills will receive a crit chance and damage or crit damage buff when using this engraving. Supercharge is amazing for 3 of your burstiest skills. It also increases the damage of these charge attacks, adding more to that burst. Grudge is a very strong engraving, but only if you can get it to level 3. The damage received is too much of a risk at levels 1 and 2, so I would only consider this if you have level 3, and therefore it's the lowest priority of the core engravings. For your supplementary engravings, there are a few options to go for. There is Spear Absorption, Keen Blunt Weapon, Master Brawler, or Cursed Doll. Spear Absorption is a solid engraving because it gives us passive move and attack speed, and the attack speed is going to speed up your attacks, obviously, most notably your charge attacks. So this will be your Surge Cannon, your Gunlance Shot, and your Charge Stinger. The move speed also helps, as this class requires constant repositioning to be able to hit the head of the boss. Keen Blunt Weapon is great for high crit builds since it's increasing the crit damage. Just a solid option, but only if you're actually able to acquire a sizable amount of crit. Master Brawler is great for red build because almost all of your attacks have frontal damage modifiers already, and getting this engraving is going to further maximize your damage to bosses. Again, this is going to require to be frequently repositioning to be able to hit the head of the boss, so just keep that in mind. And lastly, we have Cursed Doll, which is a solid option for some passive damage increase. It does come with a negative effect of having healing reduced on you, but this shouldn't be a major issue due to our innate tankiness as Gunlancers. Even if you're playing the red build, your identity shield is extremely powerful and should be able to keep you healthy. Let's talk about the stat priority for the red build. The 2 stats you want to focus on are crit as the primary stat with swiftness as your secondary focus. Because Lone Knight enhances your crit damage, and there's a chance you'll be getting Keen Blunt Weapon, it just plays well into those engraving effects. Swiftness gives you cooldown reduction, and a lot of your skills already have long cooldowns, so that helps a lot. It also has attack speed, which helps get those charge times off, increasing our burst. And lastly, gives some move speed, which is always a nice option for classes to have. Specialization is not a good stat because the damage only boosts your blue skills, and therefore we're going to lose a lot of value because we're only really taking bash as a damage option. So yeah, try to avoid specialization if you can. Alright, moving on to the skills you will be using. There are 2 builds specifically I want to cover, which depends on whether or not you're utilizing Supercharge engravings. Both builds are specifically for boss fights, and I will assume you have at least 270 skill points, which should be pretty attainable early on in the game. This first build will be for if you're not using Supercharge. So for our first skill, we have Fire Bullet. This is going to be your primary filler skill, and we want to level it up to 10. When you run the 2-3-1 build, you will actually have a ton of cooldown reduction, so there's a chance you'll be spamming this skill very often. The skill also has a decent amount of destruction damage if you take the 2-1-2 build. This is going to be very important for some bosses as you need to destroy certain parts of them or destroy shields and stuff like that. The next skill we want to invest in is Surge Cannon. This is our primary DPS skill, and you want to frequently use the 3-3-2 build for most damage. For another burst option, we want to invest 10 points into Charge Stinger, and for this build, we will use 2-2-2 for tripods. Now let's get into some of the utility that the Gunlancer offers. For our first skill, we have Shout of Hatred. This skill gets leveled up to 10, and because of the taunt effect, we just have a ton of utility. So if we go the 1-3-1 build, we have some party buff damage, and this last tripod also gives us extra shield meter, which increases our overall survivability and tankiness. The next utility skill we want to invest in is Nalagia's Energy. Bringing this up to 10 with the 3-1-2 build increases a lot of your party's survivability, but another option you can go with is the 3-2-2. This gives the Nalagia's Energy a cleanse effect, which can be very powerful on certain boss fights if there's a debuff that you need to deal with. And for our final utility skill, this is a very important one too. We have Bash. This should be leveled up to 7. And if you take the 1-1, this gives you some party synergy, because you can reduce the boss's armor with the armor destruction tripod. And then you also give yourself a burst window because of ready attack, which is going to increase your attack power by 25% for 5 seconds. For the armor destruction debuff, you want to try to have as high an uptime as possible on the boss so that your party can deal as much damage as possible. Okay, so we have 2 more abilities to cover. The first one is Dash Upper Fire, and this is the counter of this build. So whenever the boss is highlighted blue, you can use Dash Upper Fire, and this will interrupt them and stun them briefly if you hit them in the head. And if you take the Ready Attack tripod, this third one here, it will give you a little damage buff for a short period of time. And for the last skill, we have Counter Gunlance. This is a counter which gives you almost pure immunity to incoming damage. And if you leveled up to 4 with another Ready Attack tripod, you'll get yet another damage boost for 4 seconds if you successfully counter. When using this build, there are a couple combo routes that you can do. To get the maximum damage out, you want to do something like this. You'll start with a Shout of Hatred, then you will bash the target, you will use a Dash Upper Fire, but only the uppercut portion, not the second half, and then you'll follow it up with a Surge Cannon, into a Fire Bullet, and then lastly, if you have time, finish that with Charge Stinger. So if we speed that up, it should look something like this. For the second build I want to cover, we assume that you have access to Supercharge and the same amount of skill points of 270. There are 2 changes to note here, and that's to Fire Bullet and adding in Gunlance Shot. Fire Bullet in this case is going to get dropped to level 4, and you will take the second tripod, Lucky Chance. The second change we'll be making is the addition of Gunlance Shot in place of Counter Gunlance, and you will want to level Gunlance Shot up to 10, taking the 2-2-2 build. What this does is it transforms Gunlance Shot into a charged attack, and it'll start benefiting from Supercharge. So now if I change my engravings to have Supercharge included, so something like this, almost tier 3, unfortunately, not quite getting there. This will increase my charge speed of my attacks, so they get off much faster. And this is going to boost my burst damage quite a bit. A combo when using Supercharge and Gunlance Shot would look something like this. You would start with a Shout of Hatred. This applies the head damage modifier and also taunts the boss. You would Bash. This reduces the boss's armor and gives you a damage increase for a moment. And then you would Surge Cannon and follow this up with your Gunlance Shot. This will knock you back out of range. You can then Charge Stinger to get back into range and finish it off with a Fire Bullet. So if we speed that up, it would look something like this. As one final little note of customization, let's go over some of the runes that you can equip to your skills. Some of the bread and butter are going to be Gale Wind. This is going to increase your skill casting speed, and you want to equip this to any of your big burst skills. So anything like Charge Stinger, you can also equip it to Surge Cannon, Charge Stinger, and Gunlance Shot. Unfortunately, I don't have a third Gale Wind to equip to my Gunlance Shot, but you get the idea. The next rune we want to go over is Quick Recharge. This is going to have a chance to reduce all your cooldowns by a percentage whenever the equipped skill is used. So if you equip this to something like Fire Bullet or something with a low cooldown, it's going to have a high chance of actually proccing and reducing the remaining cooldowns of all of your skills. So basically just lets us get Surge Cannon back, lets us get Hateful Cry or Shout of Hatred, sorry. It lets us get those long cooldowns up and running again. So again, you want to equip this to something like your Fire Bullet because it's going to have a high uptime. So for our next skill, we have Bleed, and this is going to apply a damage over time effect on a boss whenever the equipped skill lands. Bleed actually does a ton of damage, so make sure that you're equipping this to maybe one of your other filler skills. In this case, I like to equip it to my Bash skill because Bash has only a 10-second cooldown, so it's got decent uptime in that case, and again, it just does a ton of damage. Next, we have Rage, and this is a chance to increase your attack and move speed for a short time. So it kind of has a window of opportunity to increase your burst damage or your move speed and stuff like that. But again, it's not really guaranteed and it's hard to play around. I would equip this to Dash Upper Fire because I don't really think Dash Upper Fire synergizes well with anything. And if it happens to trigger Rage when you actually get a counter, it's gonna actually pay off pretty well. Now, I don't actually have the runes to show here, but Focus is going to be a great rune to equip to your support skills. And this rune basically reduces the mana consumption for your skills. And because Nalagia's energy and Shout of Hatred use so much mana, this is going to help prevent any of those mana issues you might run into. All right, let's move on to the blue build. So the Combat Readiness build is going to make you extremely tanky while having a pretty steady damage output. You really lack on the burst front, but you don't really need it because you're just literally going to be standing on top of the boss the entire fight. You don't really have to worry about anything. You can just take damage for every single attack. So let's start with the engravings, and similar to the previous sections, I will list your core engravings first along with the supplementary engravings. For your core engravings, we will want to go with something like Combat Readiness, Barricade, or Grudge. Combat Readiness only needs to be level 1 because this engraving doesn't scale exceptionally well, and it performs very well with just a single point. What this skill does is anytime you have a shield active and that shield gets damaged, you gain a stacking damage buff for a short period of time. It also just buffs your shield damage or your blue skill damage. Barricade provides a damage buff whenever you're shielded, and with the blue build, that's going to be often providing a consistent damage buff. Lastly, with Grudge, it's the same deal as the red build. You only want to take this if you can get it to level 3 because the consistent damage it provides doesn't outscale the damage received until rank 3. Next, we have the supplementary engravings, and here there is Spirit Absorption, Stabilized Status, and Cursed Doll. Once again, Spirit Absorption just provides consistent move speed and attack speed, which is just nice to have. Stabilized Status provides a damage increase when you're above a certain health threshold, and since the Blue Gunlancer should never really take actual health damage, the passive should always be active. And lastly, we have Cursed Doll, and it's similar to Stabilized Status. It provides a consistent damage buff at the cost of some healing, but since you won't be taking damage through your shields, this is just a passive damage increase. Alright, let's talk about the stat priority for the Blue Gunlancer, and you're going to want to focus on Specialization and Crit. Specialization increases your damage of all shield-based attacks, which happen to be all of your blue skills, and it also increases your shield absorption effectiveness along with the generation rate. So basically, very good stat for Blue Gunlancer. Crit is just going to give you a little bit of extra burst damage to your skills because obviously doing double damage is pretty nice. Swiftness isn't bad, it just doesn't provide as much since your cooldowns are already a little lower than the red build. You also don't have to worry about as tight of burst windows for the attack speed component. And lastly, the move speed isn't as relevant since you'll likely be tanking hits regardless. For the skills, we will once again be looking at a build of 270 skill points. Shield Bash is your primary filler skill, and if you level this up to 4, we will take the third tripod, which is going to increase the attack speed of Shield Bash. The next skill we want to add is Leap Attack, and we want to level this up to 10 and take the 1-2-1 build. This is going to give us a double jump on the leap, and each jump is going to leave behind an electric field, which is going to deal some passive damage. For your burstiest skill in the Blue Gunlancer, we have Guardian's Thunderbolt. This gets leveled up to 10, and we will take the 3-2-1 build. Next up, we have Shield Charge, and this gets leveled to 10, and we will take the 3-3-2 build. And this is going to give us a little bit of extra move speed options, as well as some little extra damage. It's not a ton, but the skill just does a lot of utility things too. The next 3 skills are the same as Red build, and that is Shout of Hatred, Nalagia's Energy, and Bash. And Bash gets leveled up to 7 here. But Shout of Hatred will use the same build, which is 1-3-1. And Nalagia's Energy, same thing, will be 3-1-2. And finally for Bash, we will take the 1-1. And this is like Bash is going to provide us a little bit of a damage window, which Blue Gunlancer is going to revolve around. For the very last skill added, we have Dash Upper Fire, and this is going to be leveled up to 4. And we will take the Ready Attack tripod. The combo for Blue Gunlancer is going to look similar to the Red build, and that is that it starts with a Bash. This is going to reduce a boss's armor and grant you a short damage buff, in which case you want to fit as many of your hard-hitting skills in as possible, which are going to be Leap Attack and Guardian's Thunderbolt. So that would look something like this. Then Leap Attack, Guardian's Thunderbolt, and then you might have just enough time in that self-damage window. Let me reduce my cooldowns here. You might have just enough time to fit a Shield Bash, and after you Shield Bash, you want to use Shield Charge. So for the full combo itself, that would look something like this. So start with Bash, Leap Attack, Guardian's Thunderbolt, Shield Bash, and into a Shield Charge. And that's going to be your general combo, and you'll want to repeat that as often as possible. Okay, so let's talk about the runes and where to equip them. So for Galewind, again, since this is going to speed up your burst damage skills, we will attach Galewind to Guardian's Thunderbolt and Leap Attack. These are our 2 hardest hitting abilities in this build. I'm going to cover the next 2 runes together because they're kind of interchangeable on the skills that are going to use them. And those are going to be Bleed and Quick Recharge. You want to equip these to either Shield Bash or just Bash, because these 2 skills have similar cooldowns and get used at similar times. It's really up to you and how you want to use it. I would recommend using Bleed on Bash and then using Quick Recharge on Shield Bash, mostly because Shield Bash is going to be used after your Guardian's Thunderbolt and Leap Attack, which gives it a chance to rock Quick Recharge, reducing those cooldowns a little bit. But it's also easier to trigger Bleed with Shield Bash than it is just your regular Bash, because Bash's attack range is pretty abysmal. And it's the same deal with the last rune. I don't have it to show here, but Focus can be equipped to Nalagia's Energy and Shout of Hatred due to their intense mana costs. Oh, and lastly, Rage can be equipped to Dash Upper Fire as usual, because if you counter a boss and a Rage triggers, you might get a little nice damage bonus out of it. So very quickly, I want to cover the awakening skills available to the Gunlancer and which one you should take. Honestly, both of the awakening skills are very good and can be used in almost any situation. Guardian's Protection, which is the base one that you'll unlock, it's going to deal a pretty decent amount of burst damage, and it's going to fill your shield gauge up to full on initial use. And if you stand within the area, so let me use that here. If you stand within this little arena that it summons, you and your party are going to take 40% reduced damage. So it's a good utility and survivability tool. And it's just a great opening to fights because, again, it's going to give you maximum shield gauge, which lets you stay in fights longer. The second awakening skill, Lance of Judgment, does more damage, and it also provides a crit damage for you and your allies if you stand within the radius. So let me refresh my cooldowns here. I forgot to do that. So if I equip Lance of Judgment and I summon that here, you can also move where you want to summon it. So if I drop that on the boss here, there's a little bit of burst here, and if I stand in it, I'm getting a 10% crit rate. This is very good for if a boss gets countered or you stagger them and your party is just going to pop off. So basically, it's up to you and how you prefer to play. All right, so when should you play red versus the blue build? Red and blue warlord are both viable in the endgame and both excel at different areas. Blue warlord is able to provide consistent damage output without really needing to rely on front attacks. The build is extremely tanky and forgiving to play. It's also less expensive to build for because you don't need to worry about getting level 3 for your class engraving to be effective. Red warlord is a monster at destruction. If a boss has any sort of destruction based mechanic, there's no other class right now that's better than the Red Warlord. The class has some excellent burst damage, however it relies very heavily on hitting the head of a boss, so if a boss is pretty mobile or they just have a small hitbox, it can be a little frustrating to play, but some of the abilities like Surge Cannon are so satisfying to land. In summary, just play whatever build you have the most fun with. I personally prefer the Gunlance side of the class and therefore tend to play the red build as a result. Surge Cannon, like I said, just feels very satisfying to play around, and when using Fire Bullet and getting those lucky chance procs to reset the cooldown, it feels like you're machine gunning these fire bullets, and it just feels very satisfying. But I'm curious to know what you all are playing. Do you prefer to play red or the blue Gunlancer, and how have you been liking it so far? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, this was GooberTroy from Squad Up Games saying thanks for watching, and don't forget to squad up and have fun.